The underground bar was almost empty that night, forgotten corner of the colony, where shadows clung to the walls and the smell of smoke and cheap liquor lingered like a curse. Damn. His eyes heavy from weeks without real rest. Once, long ago, he had been a soldier, a man with purpose. But now, he was just another lost face in a city that fed on broken people. He wanted nothing but silence. Yet silence never came. His thoughts screamed too loudly. That was when the stranger walked in. The man did not look like anyone Daniel had ever seen before. His coat shimmered faintly as though woven from threads. Of light, his face, half hidden by the brim of his hat. He carried no weapon, but when he moved, every other drunk in the bar lowered their eyes, as if afraid of what he carried in his presence. Without asking, he pulled out the chair across from Daniel and placed something on the table. It was a glass, filled with a glowing silver liquid that pulsed faintly as if alive. The light flickered against Daniel's tired face, and for a moment, he thought it was breathing. The stranger's voice was low, steady, and heavy with meaning. "One sip," he said, sliding the glass toward him, "and you will never be human again." The words hit Daniel harder than any blade. He stared at the glass, his mouth dry, his heart pounding in his chest. He wanted to laugh, to dismiss it as some strange drug, another trap sold in the colony to desperate souls like him. It's something about the way the glass pulsed. Something about the way the liquid whispered against the rim. I told him this was no trick. It was real. Daniel clenched his fists under the table, his mind spinning. He should have pushed it away. He should have left. But he didn't. His whole life he had carried a weight that never lifted. The feeling that he was missing something, that he was only half alive. The city had stripped him of his identity. War had robbed him of his purpose, and now he was nothing. A broken man with nothing to lose. The stranger's words echoed in his ears like a dare. Never human again. Wanted? Without another thought, without hesitation, Daniel lifted the glass and pressed it to his lips. The liquid was colder than ice, yet when it touched his tongue, fire spread through his veins. His body jolted as though lightning had struck him, his breath catching in his throat. At the art. The bar around him blurred, the dim lights twisting into spirals of color. He could hear whispers, hundreds of voices, speaking in languages he could not understand, but somehow felt were speaking to him. His heart thundered, each beat louder than the last, till it no longer sounded like his own heart. It was something else, something larger, hammering inside his chest. The stranger watched silently as Daniel lowered the empty glass. For a long moment, nothing happened. The fire in his veins cooled, the colors faded, and the whispers sank into silence. Daniel sat breathing hard, his hands shaking, sweat dripping down his temple. He almost laughed. Maybe it was just another drug after all, just another cruel trick to make him believe in something. But then he looked up and saw the bartender staring at him with wide, horrified eyes. The man's face was pale, his lips trembling. "You've done it?" the bartender whispered, his voice breaking. "There's no going back now." Daniel tried to speak, but his voice cracked. His chest tightened, not with pain, but with a strange, steady rhythm, like something inside him was waking. He pressed his hand against his shirt and felt Iden. Unnatural pulse, deep and strong, out of sync with his heartbeat. The whispers returned, faint but sharp, curling around his thoughts. They didn't sound like madness. They sounded like they knew him. The stranger stood, pulling his coat tighter, and tipped his hat low over his shadowed face. "We'll see soon enough," he said. "They will come for you now." And without another word, he walked back into the night. Leaving Daniel with the empty glass and a storm brewing in his chest, Daniel pushed away from the table, his chair scraping across the floor. The other drinkers avoided his gaze, shrinking back as though he carried a disease. His legs felt weak, unsteady, but his mind buzzed with sharp clarity. The bar's walls seemed closer, the air heavier, the floor unsteady beneath his boots. He stumbled outside into the cold neon glow of the city streets and stopped to catch his breath. His reflection in a broken window stared back at him, and for a moment, just a moment, he did not see himself. He saw another face, faint and overlapping his own, eyes burning like silver fire. A chill ran down his spine. He touched the glass of the window, and his reflection whispered his name. Daniel pulled his hand back, heart hammering, his breath clouding the glass. He did not know what he had swallowed, but one truth echoed inside him now, undeniable and terrifying. He was no longer just human. Something inside him was waiting to be born. The city never slept, but that night it felt different to Daniel. Neon signs flickered above the crowded streets, but the lights seemed sharper, cutting into his eyes in ways he had never felt before. Sounds reached him more clearly: the shuffle of feet, the hiss of air vents, even the faint hum of hidden wires running under the pavement. Yes, it was as if the drink had rewired him. He walked fast, head down, trying to escape the burning sensation crawling through his veins. But no matter how far he went, the whispers followed, curling at the edges of his thoughts, whispering words in strange, broken tones. Some of the voices sounded old, filled with pain. Others sounded like children. And through it all, one voice repeated his name. Daniel stumbled into a dark alley, leaning against a wall to steady his breath. His skin felt too tight, as if something beneath it wanted to break free. For a terrifying moment, he thought he saw silver light pulsing under his veins, a faint glow that faded when he blinked. He pressed his hands to his head. He had to stop this, had to make it end. But then, as his chest heaved, a memory surfaced, one he had never lived. He saw a battlefield under a blood-red sky, alien towers burning in the distance. He saw creatures with metallic skin screaming as fire rained from above. And then he saw himself, standing among them, not as Daniel, but as something else. Something with silver eyes and a body not entirely human. The memory faded as quickly as it came, leaving him shivering in the cold alley. "Not human," he muttered, the words trembling on his lips. The bartender's horrified face flashed in his mind. What had he swallowed? What had that stranger given him? A noise pulled him from his thoughts. Boots clanging on metal. Daniel looked up to see a group of armored men moving down the alley, their visors glowing blue, weapons in their hands. They were not city guards. Their armor was too advanced, their movements too disciplined. He froze, instinct screaming danger. One of them raised a device, and Daniel heard a faint beep before the soldier spoke. "Target acquired, the drink is chosen." Daniel's chest tightened, turned and ran, his boots splashing through puddles as the soldiers shouted behind him. Energy bolts lit up the alley, slamming into the walls, throwing sparks into the air. Daniel pushed himself harder than ever before, and something inside him responded. His legs carried him faster than he thought possible, his body moving with strength he had never known. He darted through twisting streets, leaping over crates, sliding under broken gates. It was as if his body was no longer entirely his, every movement sharper, quicker, more precise, but the soldiers were relentless. Their footsteps echoed behind him, always close. The whispers in his head grew louder, pushing him, guiding him through streets he had never walked before. Left, jump, hide, run. He followed without question, till finally he burst into an abandoned transit station, the broken tracks stretching into darkness. He collapsed behind an overturned bench, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his face. The soldiers entered moments later, their lights sweeping the room. Daniel pressed his hand against the floor, praying to stay hidden. That was when it happened. His palm glowed faintly against the cracked tiles, silver lines spreading out like veins of light. The whispers sharpened into a single commanding word. Remember. A flood of images tore through his mind. He saw himself, again, standing not as a soldier of Earth, but as part of something greater, a guardian, bound to an alien race that had fought to protect their prison from invaders. He saw a silver chamber deep underground, where beings of light were sealed away. He saw a war that had ended in betrayal, with humans taking what was not theirs. And he saw the drink, the same silver liquid once used as a bond. A way to join two species into one. Daniel gasped, pulling his hand back, the glow fading instantly. His head spun, the memory heavy and incomplete, but enough to terrify him. He wasn't hallucinating. The drink hadn't just changed him. It had awakened him, One of the soldiers suddenly stopped, visor glowing brighter. "He's here," the man growled. Weapons hummed as they raised them, stepping closer. Daniel's pulse raced. He had nowhere to go. His body trembled, torn between fear and a strange hunger that burned inside him. He thought of the drink, of the alien faces in his visions, of the prison whispering his name. He was caught between two worlds, and he didn't belong to either, as the soldiers closed in. The whispers inside him rose again, not warning him, but urging him. Fight. Daniel clenched his fists. For the first time he felt the power stirring within him, not as a curse, but as a weapon waiting to be unleashed. The soldiers were only steps away now, their weapons trained on him. His chest glowed faintly, the silver light pulsing in rhythm with his heart. Daniel stood slowly, his hands trembling, his body burning with a new force. He didn't know what he was becoming. He didn't know why this was happening. But one thing was certain: he wasn't helpless anymore. The whispers fell silent, leaving only one chilling truth echoing in his mind. The drink had chosen him for a reason. The night had never felt so alive to Daniel. The neon glow of the city blurred into streaks of color as his vision sharpened beyond human limits. Every breath carried scents he had never noticed before: the rust of old steel, the faint ozone of energy weapons, even the sweat of the soldiers hunting him. His body no longer belonged to the life he had lived before the drink. It was changing, adapting, becoming something that frightened him as much as it empowered him. But the soldiers didn't hesitate. They raised their weapons, their blue visors glowing like the eyes of predators. "Stand down, human," one ordered, though the word human felt strange on his tongue, as if even he doubted it. Daniel's chest burned with the silver light again. He tried to control it, to smother it, but the moment the first energy bolt cracked through the air, instinct took over. His arms snapped up, and the silver glow burst outward, forming a thin shield of light that caught the blast and split it into sparks. Both Daniel and the soldiers froze. He hadn't thought. He hadn't planned. His body had simply responded. Then everything erupted into chaos. More blasts fired, lighting the station in furious blue. Daniel darted left, faster than their eyes could follow. His fists swung out, and silver arcs of energy followed, throwing two soldiers against the wall. With bone-crushing force, the others cursed, adjusting their weapons to higher power. But Daniel no longer moved like prey. He weaved through the fight with speed that wasn't his own. Every motion guided by the whispers deep in his head. One soldier lunged forward with a blade of humming plasma. But Daniel caught the strike with his bare hand. Instead of burning, the blade hissed against his palm like fire meeting water, the silver glow flaring brighter until the weapon sputtered out. Daniel shoved the man back, breathing hard, fear mixing with exhilaration. He had never fought like this. It had never been like this. The last soldier raised a communication device, shouting, "He is awake." The drink bonded. But before he could finish, Daniel's hand shot forward, a wave of silver light slamming into him and shattering his visor. The soldier crumpled to the floor unconscious. Silence filled the ruined station, broken only by Daniel's ragged breathing. He stood surrounded by sparks, the broken bench, and the glow still faintly pulsing through his veins. His reflection caught on a cracked mirror nearby. His eyes shimmered faintly silver. Yet not entirely human anymore. He stumbled back, his mind screaming, "What's happening to me?" He whispered, gripping his head. The memories returned again, sharper this time. He saw flashes of a war fought long before Earth knew the stars. He saw beings of silver light, warriors who merged with humans through the same drink he had taken. But something had gone wrong. The bond was broken. The warriors were trapped, sealed away in prisons across the galaxy. The humans who survived were wiped of their memories. Yet now, the process had restarted with him. Daniel didn't have long to think. A sudden echo reached hymnal footsteps above the broken station. More soldiers. More hunters. He couldn't fight them all. Not like this. Not while his mind was spinning. He turned and sprinted down the empty tracks. the silver glow lighting. His path through the tunnels, the whispers guided him, pulling him deeper underground. His legs carried him for what felt like hours until finally he collapsed in a cavern carved into stone, far from the city above. The air was thick with dust and silence, but in the center stood something that made his breath catch. A black obelisk, its surface cracked with faint silver lines. Pulsing in rhythm with his chest, Daniel staggered toward it, compelled by something beyond choice. As his hand brushed the stone, the whispers surged into a roar, and a voice clearer than ever spoke within him. "You are the last, you are the key. Free us, and you will know the truth of what you are." The obelisk pulsed, releasing a shockwave that threw him back against the cavern wall. Daniel gasped as visions stormed through him. Cities not built by humans. Stars being torn apart in wars, the silver beings standing tall. And then the prisons, dozens of them scattered across galaxies, holding something the soldiers feared. His vision ended with an image burned into his mind, a symbol, sharp and glowing, carved into the prison walls. He didn't understand it, but it filled him with dread. Before he could recover, the sound of pursuit reached him again. Soldiers' lights flickered at the far end of the tunnel. Daniel staggered to his feet, heart racing, torn between running and touching the obelisk again. The whispers quieted, leaving him in silence, as if waiting for his choice. For the first time since drinking that silver liquid, Daniel understood one thing with clarity. This wasn't an accident. The drink had found him. It had awakened something hidden inside him, something that made him a threat. And maybe the only chance to stop whatever was buried within those prisons. The footsteps grew louder. His silver-lit hand trembled as he clenched it into a fist. He couldn't run forever. Whatever he was becoming, the fight had already begun. The cavern walls shook with the force of the soldiers closing in. Their boots echoed through the tunnels like a drumbeat of inevitability, and Daniel knew he couldn't simply hide. The obelisk's glow had marked him, and even in the dark he could feel its pulse sinking with his chest. His veins lit faintly silver in the dim light, betraying him. He stumbled deeper into the cavern, but every step whispered of a trap waiting ahead. The hunters were prepared this time. When the first squad burst through the stone arch, they didn't fire immediately. Instead, they raised strange rods that snapped open into glowing nets of blue energy, wide enough to cover the tunnel walls. Daniel's instincts screamed to run, but the nets were too quick, sparking and crackling as they closed in from 3 directions. His shield flared against one, but the net wrapped around the silver light itself, pulling tighter. The energy wasn't meant to kill, it was designed to cage, Daniel roared. His voice not entirely his own, the sound layered with something ancient and alien. Silver arcs exploded from his chest, ripping holes through the nets and sending the soldiers flying. For a brief moment, silence followed, his breath heavy, the acrid smell of burning circuits in the air. But then the cavern lit with more movement. Dozens of soldiers, far more than before, were streaming in from side tunnels, coordinated and relentless. This wasn't a chase anymore. It was a hunt. They drove him toward the surface with blasts that shook the stone. Daniel fought back, silver strikes cracking the ground, his new strength throwing armored men like dolls, but the numbers overwhelmed him. A blast from behind clipped his side, searing pain through his ribs. He staggered, the silver glow flickering weaker now. My body wasn't built for endless war, at least. Not yet. The drink had given him power, but it hadn't taught him how to master it. When he finally stumbled into open air, night had fallen. The city's ruined outskirts stretched before him, abandoned buildings, shattered billboards, the skeletons of towers. Above, dark ships hovered like vultures, their searchlights cutting the sky. Daniel's chest tightened at the sight. This wasn't just a handful of soldiers. This was an organized operation, and he was its target. Human surrender. A voice boomed from one of the hovering ships, amplified through the city. The drink does not belong to you. You carry what you cannot control. Submit, and your suffering will end. Daniel's blood chilled. They didn't call him by name, but their words felt personal, as if they knew him better than he knew himself. His fingers trembled. Somewhere deep inside, the whispers pushed against his fear. Do not submit. You are chosen. Then the ground beneath him cracked open. Metal towers rose from hidden panels, snapping upward into glowing pylons that connected. In arcs of blue energy, the hunters had planned this, a net on a scale far larger than before. He was at the center, the pylons forming a cage over the ruins. Each arc of light hummed with power strong enough to make the air vibrate. Daniel ran to the edge, slamming his hand against the barrier, but the silver glow in his veins recoiled as if burned. The whispers screamed now, but no instructions came. No guidance. For the first time, he felt truly alone inside this trap. The soldiers closed in from all sides, weapons aimed, nets ready. He dropped to one knee, clutching his chest, the glow in his body flickering erratically. His reflection shimmered on the barrier in front of him, his eyes almost fully silver now, his face pale with exhaustion. He didn't know how much longer. He could hold on to himself before the power inside consumed what was left of his humanity. The voice from the ship returned, calmer now, as though the fight were already won. You don't understand what you carry, human. That drink erased your place among your kind. You are no longer one of them. But you can serve. You can be useful to us. Daniel's mind raced. Was this what the drink was meant for? To create weapons for them? To enslave those who survived the transformation? His fists clenched, silver light struggling to burn brighter against the blue cage. If he gave up, if he surrendered, it was over not just for him, but for whatever truth the whispers had shown him in the obelisk. The soldiers began to advance, slow and confident. Daniel pressed his hand flat against the barrier, whispering to himself, "Come on, work." The silver glow surged through his veins, stronger, angrier. The pylons flickered as if responding to his defiance. For a moment, the blue light wavered, and the voice from the ship snapped, sharper, almost panicked. Increase power now. The cage blazed brighter, slamming Daniel back with a wave of heat and force. He collapsed to the ground, body smoking, struggling to rise. His vision blurred, and through the haze, he saw shadows, descending figures not armored like the soldiers, but cloaked, moving with quiet purpose. They slipped through the chaos, ignoring the hunters, heading straight for him. One of them knelt beside him, pulling back their hood. Her eyes glowed faint silver, just like his.
You're late,
she whispered, her voice steady in the storm. But you're not alone anymore. The night above the ruined city was alive with light blue arcs from the pylons. Silver sparks from Daniel's body and the harsh beams of the hunters' ships. Yet for Daniel, everything narrowed to the woman kneeling in front of him. Eyes, glowing the same faint silver as his, cut through the chaos with a promise. He wasn't alone. For so long, he had carried the weight of the drink, the changes, the whispers, believing he was the only one. But now, with her hand steadying his shoulder, he realized there were others. The hunters had noticed them too. Orders barked through. The Cum's weapons turned from Daniel to the cloaked strangers moving among the shadows. The woman helped him to his feet, her movements sharp, trained. "Can you stand?" she asked quickly. Daniel forced his legs to hold, even though his body screamed in protest. His chest burned from the last surge of energy, and every breath felt like fire, but he nodded. He didn't want to look weak, not in front of her, not when survival depended. On strength? Good, she whispered, her eyes flashing brighter. Then follow. Without hesitation, she sprinted toward the barrier, pulling Daniel with her. He staggered at first, but his legs began to move, driven by raw will. The other cloaked figures struck at the soldiers, not with brute force like Daniel, but with strange, precise energy strikes, silver bursts that seemed to unravel the very circuits in the hunters' weapons. Guns fizzled, nets dissolved, and the hunters fell back in confusion. Daniel realized these people weren't ordinary survivors. They carried the same power as him, but refined, controlled. The woman raised her hand at the barrier. Where Daniel's attempts had failed, hers flowed like instinct. Silver light stretched from her fingertips, weaving into the glowing blue net. The cage shivered as though resisting, then cracked open in a blinding flash. "Move!" she shouted, dragging Daniel through the gap as soon as they were outside the pylons. The hunters unleashed. Everything energy blasts rained down from ships. Heavy fire ripped through the streets. But the cloaked ones moved in perfect unison, deflecting, shielding, striking. Daniel tried to help, but his attacks came out uncontrolled, each surge shaking his body as much as it shook the enemy. Still with their protection, he managed to keep moving. They led him into the bones of the city-old subway tunnels, half collapsed and filled with shadows. Only when the sounds of pursuit finally faded did they stop. Daniel collapsed against a cracked wall, his chest heaving, the glow in his veins flickering low. The woman knelt beside him again, studying him with a mix of curiosity and approval. "You? Survived the drink without guidance," she said softly. "That almost never happens. It explains why they're hunting you so hard." Daniel forced himself upright, his throat dry. "Hey, who are you?" She hesitated, then pulled her hood back fully. Her features were sharp, almost otherworldly, but human enough that he could read the exhaustion in her eyes. "We're like you. We took the drink too long ago. But we didn't lose ourselves. We found each other. And we learned to shape what? It gave us, we call ourselves the Echoes." The Echoes, Daniel repeated, the word heavy on his tongue, and the hunters. "They're called the Collectors," she said bitterly. "They created the drink, not for freedom, not for power, but for control. Humans who drink it become something else, something they want to use. The ones who survive are taken, turned into weapons. The ones who fail." She trailed off, and Daniel didn't need her to finish. He'd seen enough in the soldiers' eyes, in the way they spoke of him as if he were property, not a person. The cloaked figures gathered around, their silver eyes glinting faintly in the dim light. For the first time since he had taken the glass, Daniel felt a strange comfort. These people knew what it was like. They carried the same burden, the same whispers. He wasn't an experiment alone in the dark anymore, but that comfort didn't last. The woman leaned closer, her voice urgent. "You're different, Daniel. The drink reacts to you in ways it doesn't with us. The whispers you hear, they're not random. They're guiding you. That's why the Collectors are desperate. You're not just another echo. You're something they fear." Daniel froze at her words. Fear? The Collectors had ships, armies, technology beyond anything humans could fight. And yet they feared him? The thought was both terrifying and electrifying. The whispers stirred again in his mind, louder now, as if awakened by her revelation. "You are the key. You must not break." He clenched his fists, his voice low. "Then we fight them, together." The Echoes exchanged looks, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally the woman nodded. "We'll fight, but you need to understand being with us puts you in greater danger than ever. They'll stop at nothing to take you. If they can't, they'll burn everything around you." Daniel thought of the city above, of the ships circling like vultures, of the countless people who had no idea what was really happening. He thought of the drink on the table, the choice he had made without hesitation, and the path that had forced him onto. His fear didn't vanish, but it hardened into something sharper. "Resolve. Then let them come," he said, the silver in his eyes burning brighter. "If they want me, they'll have to tear this world apart to get me." The tunnels trembled. Faintly, dust falling from the ceiling, as if the city itself shivered at his words. Somewhere above, the hunters were regrouping, their ships tightening their grip. But down in the shadows, surrounded by the Echoes, Daniel no longer felt like prey. For the first time, he felt like a weapon pointed back at those who had made him. The tunnels could no longer hide them. For days, Daniel and the Echoes had moved from one ruin to another, hunted without pause. The Collectors grew bolder each hour, flooding the skies with ships, flooding the streets with drones, their nets tightening until the entire city felt like a trap. Daniel felt the pressure in his bones and the way the whispers inside him screamed louder every time the ships came near. The Echoes told him it was because the Collectors were calling to him, pulling at whatever force now lived in his blood. But another voice, deeper and steadier, told him something else. They wanted his surrender, and if he gave it, humanity would pay the price. That night, in the underground hall where the Echoes gathered, the air was heavy with decision. Maps were spread across broken tables, their silver eyes flickering in the gloom. The woman who had first saved him, her name was Lyra, stood before the group, her voice cutting through the silence. The collectors don't just want Daniel. They want control of Earth itself. If they take him, they'll use him as the seed for something greater, something we won't be able to stop. We either run forever, or we strike now. Murmurs rippled through the echoes. They were survivors, not soldiers. They had fought in shadows, never openly, but Lyra's words left no other path. All eyes turned to Daniel. They felt their gaze, like weight pressing down, but he didn't shrink from it. For too long he had lived as if he were no one, just another forgotten soul in a ruined city. Now the fate of everyone seemed to rest on him. The thought terrified him, but it also burned with a strange clarity. He could no longer be just a survivor. "We fight," Daniel said finally, his voice steady even as the whispers thundered inside his skull. "Not for me, for all of us. They think they've made me their weapon. Let's prove them wrong." The echoes bowed their heads, not in submission, but in acceptance. Plans began to form paths through the ruins, ambush points, ways to bring down the pylons that powered the collector's barrier over the city. But deep down, Daniel knew it wasn't about plans. The collectors had ships, armies, machines. The echoes had only themselves and the strange light inside them, and him. When dawn broke, the city shook with fire. Collector ships descended like black arrows, energy beams slicing through the skyline. The echoes emerged from the tunnels like sparks from the ashes, striking with precision, tearing down pylons, scattering the hunters. Daniel fought at their side, each surge of power ripping through him with raw violence. Buildings crumbled, streets split apart, but the silver in his veins only burned hotter. The collectors did not retreat. They sent something worse. From the sky descended a vessel unlike the others, massive and alive, its hull pulsing with dark light. A voice filled the city, not through speakers, but directly inside every mind. "Daniel, you are not theirs. You are ours. Come and be what you were, made to be." The echoes staggered, clutching their heads as the voice pressed into their skulls. Daniel dropped to his knees, his vision swimming. The whispers inside him rose like a storm, clashing with the collector's command. He felt as though he were being torn in two halves, drawn to the ship's dark promise, half anchored by the silver light that had kept him human. Lyra's hand gripped his arm, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Daniel, listen to me. You choose who you are. Not them, not the drink. You." Her words hit him like lightning. He forced himself upright, his body trembling, his eyes blazing brighter than ever. The collector's ship loomed above, its core opening like a mouth. He knew what it wanted, his surrender. But he also knew what the whispers had tried to tell him all along. You are the key. You must not break. Daniel raised his hands toward the ship, not in surrender, but in defiance. The power surged out of him, not wild this time, but focused. Shaped by his will, a column of silver light roared upward, piercing the vessel's dark core. The air split with sound. The ground cracked open, and the ship let out a scream that shook the city. The echoes shielded their eyes as the collector ship burned, its dark light unraveling into nothing. The pylons across the city flickered, then collapsed, their controls shattered. The hunters broke formation, their machines falling silent, their armies scattering like dust in the wind. When it was over, Daniel stood alone in the smoking ruins, his body weak but unbroken. The whispers had gone silent, leaving only his own heartbeat in his ears. The echoes approached, their faces filled with awe and relief. Lyra looked at him, her voice quiet but certain. You chose. You stayed human. Daniel looked to the sky, where the last fragments of the collector ship dissolved into fire. He didn't know if they were truly defeated or if more would come. But he knew one thing. They would not take his humanity, no matter how hard they tried. He had made his choice, and it would echo far beyond the ruins of this city. The drink had promised to erase what he was. Instead, it had forced him to fight for a hand in the end. He had won.